All right, guys, hello and welcome to the next episode of the Game Over Stream Team podcast. Today, we got a very special guest with us here. We got Dr. John. We're going to be calling him John for the rest of the podcast. He is currently the Chief Strategic Development Officer of Ananda Development, PCL. It's a public company that has a lot of properties, and he's going to give us his input today on 3 separate topics. So we're going to be talking about aliens, singularity, and are we living in a simulation? We're most likely not going to have time to talk about all of them, so we'll see where the conversation goes. But to my left, as always, we got Os, Mr. Bangkok Hooker, who has his own show on Discovery Channel. And on the other side, we got Hugh and John. So Os, why don't you introduce yourself first? Oh, good button.
Yo, what's up, guys? I'm Os Bangkok Hooker. I have a TV show, Discovery Channel. I have a YouTube channel. And I like to catch snakeheads. So yeah, tune into my channel and see stuff.
All right, John, who are you and what are you doing here today?
Yes.
I have absolutely no idea why I'm here today. Why you've selected an executive in a property company to talk about aliens is logic only you guys understand.
Because you're an interesting individual, and you know you're a friend of mine, and you have a lot of interesting things to say, dude. Okay. A lot of people can learn from you.
Okay, well, if people want an education, then they're tuned in for the right thing. Huh?
Yeah.
And that's actually why we thought it was a great idea to have you on, because I've heard and I've met you a couple times, and I think we can all agree that the people that met you think you're a very smart man, and that's why we thought that you would have some very interesting thoughts on these topics. So that's what we're doing here today. Well, really, that was just the side. Actually, our fans wanted to hear about aliens from someone as you, and that's why that topic came out. Okay. But that wasn't on the original list.
Yeah. Well, no, I actually added that because it was a few years ago when we actually had just a night out and we were just discussing about aliens, and I remember until today that you had a pretty interesting thing to say about the existence of aliens. Based on the timeline of the universe, right, John? Do you remember that vaguely? Like you were saying that the chances and the possibilities of us having aliens is actually aliens and humans coexisting at the same time. The chances of during the time frame is very unlikely, or something.
Well, this is based on if you remember, it was New Year, and I was talking about the Fermi paradox. Do you remember that?
No, I don't know what that is. I don't remember that.
Okay. Here's the educational part then.
Okay.
The Fermi paradox comes from a scientist named, coincidentally enough, Fermi, who said that given how many billions of stars there are in the galaxy, never mind the universe, just in our own galaxy, there are billions and billions of them.
Okay.
And given that even if you assign very, very low probabilities for planets forming, planets being in the right zone from the star, planets being the right materials, life forming, and intelligence life arriving from that, even if you put very, very low possibilities for each of those things, there are so many stars that it's almost impossible to understand why we haven't detected another intelligent alien life. So this is known as the Fermi paradox, that there are so many stars that even if the probability or the possibility of intelligent life is tiny, then there should still be millions of intelligent civilizations out there. And yet we've detected zero. We've detected zero, we've been looking for half a century, and we've detected zero radio waves, zero signs through. We can detect planets now, and we haven't found any evidence whatsoever of any civilization, never mind even at our level, but more advanced, where they can move planets around and build Dyson spheres and things like this. So this is known as the Fermi paradox, that mathematically, the probability or the possibility of there being an intelligent civilization. So the paradox is, why are we the only ones? That's the paradox. That's the weird thing about why are there no aliens. It's really bizarre given the numbers.
Okay. So why is it that we're the only one? Based on these, is that just a mathematical equation of why we haven't come across any aliens? But does that give its own perspective on why is that? Well,
there's 2 possibilities. One of them's pretty good for us, and one of them is really bad for us.
Right.
I
remember this. Yes. Mm-hmm.
One of them is that there's a choke point that it's very, very hard for life to get through, which what would be very, very good for us is if it's before us. Like if the possibility of life forming at all is very, very low, or if the possibility of life going from single cell to multi-cell is very, very low, or if the possibility of multi-cell eventually becoming intelligent is very, very low, that's good for us because it means that we've already got through the choke point. It's not going to kill us. What could be very bad for us is if the choke point is later. If the reason we don't detect any intelligent aliens is because 99.99999% of the time they kill themselves before they're detectable, then that's very bad for us because it means we've still got the choke point to go through, which is why finding life on another planet would actually be very bad for us because it shows that the choke point isn't as early as it could be. If life has formed on other planets in our solar system, that means the choke point is later than very, very early, which makes it a higher probability we haven't gone through it yet, which means a higher probability that we're going to die.
Shit.
Well, that's depressing.
Wait. Wait, did you understand all that, by the way?
Yeah, imagine it being like a firework. It burns out, like life exists, sparks, grows into a certain size, and then burns out when it runs out of energy because there's only a finite amount of what it can become.
Okay. But I still don't understand the choke point wise, like the before, and after. Wait.
I watched that video you told me about because after you told that John might come on the podcast, I watched that paradox. I watched 2 videos of that paradox, and I really wish that I had that image next to me, but what he just said I saw in a picture. Oh, God, I can't explain it. But the way when he just explained the whole thing, it made perfect sense to me.
Okay.
Goddamn, let me see if I can
okay, John, hold on. Can you explain the choke point again? Like, I still, what does that mean, the choke point? Sorry. I still don't get that.
Okay, because mathematically, even if there were very low chances of civilizations arising, there are so many billions of stars, there should be a lot of intelligent civilizations in the universe, but there aren't, which means that they're disappearing or not arriving for some reason. There's a reason why those intelligences are not in the universe that resolves
I see. I kind of get it. Okay, right.
So either life isn't forming as often as we think it does, or it's not advancing from single to multi-cell as often as we think it does, or the bad possibility for us is that once it gets to technological intelligence that
it goes extinct.
Yes, faster than we think. That would be bad for us. If the probability of life arising at all is very, very low, and we're already through that point because we exist, then we're lucky. That means the universe is ours, and that there aren't going to be many competitors out there. So no Klingons or Romulans to stop us expanding when we finally get out there.
But no aliens, if that's the case. It was just us.
Yes.
Yeah, because I also find it very interesting that there are actually... correct me if I'm wrong here, John, but I have read that there is actually tons of habitable planets, but there is 0 life on them. Like there's water and stuff, and there's things that looks like ecosystems, but yet there's no life forms at all. Is that correct?
I don't think they've got that much detail, but certainly they've got the resolution now that they can say that this planet, it's in what they call a habitable zone.
Yeah.
So not too hot, not too cold. They think it's got water on it with the temperature, liquid water. So all the things that we think are necessary for life, they've got the resolution now that they are detecting. Wherever they look, they find them. So it's not a low number of these habitable planets. So that factor in the Fermi equation, that factor is actually higher than we probably estimated, which makes it even more of a mystery. Where are the intelligent civilizations?
So how is it that we actually ended up on this planet? Is there any science on that? Like, why are we on this particular planet and not on any of the others in the so-called habitable zone?
Well, that's the anthrocentric viewpoint, which is delving into philosophy. But why are we here to contemplate the universe? Because we are here to contemplate the universe. If we weren't here to contemplate the universe, then we couldn't contemplate the universe. So that's just it.
It's a whole chicken and egg thing, isn't it?
Oh, okay.
Because I also read that this is also part of the conspiracy that we're living in a simulation, right? The fact that there are no aliens and the fact that we're the only ones here, isn't that part of the growth or the spawn of if we're living in a simulation theory?
Well, I don't know. I mean, if you can reproduce the universe down to the quantum level, adding a few aliens wouldn't be too hard.
Yeah.
I mean, they managed to add them to Elite Dangerous, so.
Okay. All right. I guess those two subjects could kind of somewhat relate, right? Shit.
Yeah, because that's what I'm thinking. Like, if we're living in a simulation, and like he's saying, then why are there no aliens? Because it shouldn't be that hard to add them. Because when I read up on are we living in a simulation, the Fermi paradox came up. It was also part in one of the videos.
Well, if you're saying that, then there could be many different possibilities that our creator could have had, right?
Exactly.
I mean, it could have been way more creative with just aliens.
Or maybe everything's just too far apart for anyone to reach.
Because were you speaking, John, about just our galaxy, or were you speaking galaxies in general? You spoke about the galaxy we're in.
No, the whole universe.
The whole universe.
Yeah. What? Yeah. Come on, it can't just be our galaxy. It's like
We can't really see the whole universe yet, though.
no, because it's still expanding, right?
Yeah.
Well, we can, but the further out you look, then the further
more light, the time it takes. Yeah.
Right. So when you get far enough back, eventually you'll get to far enough away, eventually you'll be looking at the Big Bang.
So, what should we do, Dr. John? In your opinion, how should we go about this? Like, what's is this like a positive? How do you look at it? Is this like a positive or a negative thing? I mean, I don't know. For you.
Well, there's no answer to this at this point, and there's nothing you can do about it anyway. So why worry? It's
Right.
just an interesting intellectual exercise, but there's nothing anybody can personally do about it. There's no way it's going to affect your life, unless we find out the Fermi paradox is wrong, that the aliens actually have super stealth technology and they're deliberately hiding themselves from us because we're too primitive, and then one day they'll appear on the lawn of the White House or on top of the Forbidden Palace, whoever's the
But I mean,
and here we are. Until that day happens, don't worry about it.
I mean, if they did have super stealth technology taking over our planet, it shouldn't be that hard.
So, what do you think, John?
Why would they want to take, if they've got the technology to be able to cross interstellar distances, then resources no longer become an issue.
So in your eyes, what do you think? What do you want to happen? Like, I don't know, like, are there superheroes out there? Do you wish that there's aliens out there that's gonna come and, I don't know, collaborate with us and teach us or make us, I don't know. What do you think? What would you like to happen?
Personally, I hope there are no aliens because it's tempting to think, oh, I hope the aliens will turn up and they'll bring technology and they'll bring wisdom and they'll solve all our problems. Mm-hmm. But what tends to happen, or what we've seen from our own history, when a more advanced culture meets a less advanced culture, even if the more advanced culture is benign and wants to help them, you witness a collapse of the less advanced culture, because all the things that hold that culture together, all the common beliefs, all the social structures, all the morality, it all melts away, because people say, well, everything I was told, here's somebody else who knows more, so I'm not going to believe anything I was taught anymore. I'm not going to believe any structures. And you see community breakdown, societal breakdown in the less advanced societies, even if the most advanced societies are trying not to interfere. So any civilization that can cross interstellar distances, we're going to be incredibly primitive compared to them. So it's very unlikely our society will survive. And there's a conspiracy theory that the US government studied this in the 1950s and came to the same conclusion, or even in the 1940s. And the conspiracy theorists state that the US policy is explicit to hide any alien visitation from the public for specifically this reason, that it'll cause a questioning of all social structures and a collapse of society. So the conspiracy theory is that's why governments try to hide aliens from us.
Really? Oh, okay. So that's why. I've kind of always wondered, why would the government try to hide that? That's the conspiracy.
That's the rationale for the conspiracy theory, yeah.
Okay. I see.
Normally,
Yeah. Okay.
I was gonna say normally I'm very talkative in this podcast, but I don't have a lot to say. I'm just taking in the information.
I know, right? I'm almost like I'm not even really playing this game right now.
Yeah, no, I'm just listening.
You mean sometimes it's good to listen?
Yeah. I'm bringing a car, by the way.
Okay.
Right. So why is it that in Hollywood, like, there's always like when there's movies about aliens, they always come to invade us? Like that, is that just Hollywood? Is that what, or is that like theory that most people have that they always have to come and take over to take our
Wait,
natural
you just hit me.
resources? Oh, I did. Sorry.
I'm trying to get in the car.
Yeah, John.
Well, Hollywood makes what sells. Simple as that.
Oh,
So people like conflict. People like it's basically it's a war movie. Instead of Nazis, they've got aliens. That's all it is.
okay.
Yeah, I mean they have made a lot of movies to make money out of the Nazis, and there's so many war movies and this and that. And there's even been stupid things like Nazis took over the moon and then invaded Earth after getting technology from the moon. There's so many stupid things about that. So that makes
That
perfect
seemed
sense.
like a pretty cool one.
Dude, it's the worst movie on
Iron Heart, right?
Yeah, Iron Sky or something.
Iron Sky.
Yeah, it's
Oh.
awful.
Oh yeah, that movie was terrible.
No, that movie is so bad it's good.
Exactly. Once,
It
Dr.
really is
John,
one of those.
you
It's
understand
so bad
me.
it's good.
You
It really is.
understand me. Once in a while, you gotta watch one of those really bad, but it's good kind of videos, you know?
They made a second one.
Yes, they
Why
do.
wouldn't they?
Yeah.
It's worth this. It's worth the trilogy at least.
So here's a good question from the viewers, but I'm not sure if you know the answer to it. But they're asking, is our technology so advanced now that we would actually be able to predict an asteroid collision? Because I mean, many conspiracy theories over the years have been that ultimately we're going to get wiped out by an asteroid or something from the space period. Are we advanced enough to predict something like that? And if we can predict it, can we stop it? 'Cause, I mean, that's probably the biggest fear in terms of how we're going to be wiped out if you're not looking at aliens or wiping ourselves out with nuclear weapons.
My understanding, I mean, I'm not an expert in this, and there's probably a lot of technology that's military and secret and hasn't been publicly released. But my understanding is that no, that we haven't got the sensors to be able to detect these things reliably enough before they come in. So, everybody just hope for the best. But the odds are it's not going to happen in your lifetime.
Okay. Well, so do you think we'll actually be able to... Because we talked about this on the last podcast randomly, but there seems to be like a mission to start building stuff on Mars to 2022. Do you think that in our lifetime we'll be able to colonize Mars?
I think so. No?
Like
Probably.
building like a space shuttle that can actually like bring a colony to Mars and like allowing them to live there with their own ecosystem. If you've seen the series The Expanse, that's like one way of looking at like living on Mars and Earth separately.
Well, according to documentaries I've seen on the Discovery Channel, they seem to have all the tech worked out. They just need to find a government willing to pay for it. But,
You know?
So
Elon,
It costs money, man.
Montes. Come here. Oh yeah.
but Elon Musk thinks he can work out a way of doing it so much cheaper that it becomes possible.
Okay. Yeah, they were saying in the chat if we can make hydrogen fuel, we can. I don't know what hydrogen fuel is, so you can't comment on that.
Hey, come here. I have 8 time. There's no gas in the car. What are you doing?
Apologies.
Okay. So, well, I mean, in our lifetime, then that goes back to singularity, right? We're supposed to live like up to. Oh, wait. What? Okay. Singularity. What do you think about that, John?
I think this is much more likely to. I mean, personally, I think there's a very high probability that this is mankind's last century. And it's not because of aliens or black holes or asteroids or nuclear weapons. It's because of AI.
Oh, wait, so let me rephrase that. For everyone who doesn't know what singularity is, it's basically AI taking over, right? That's like we develop something that is a lot smarter than us, and ultimately that will have devastating or even possibly like the whole humanity as collateral damage from AI. Is that correct?
No. Wait. Yes, but not
Yes.
completely. It's
What?
it's the it's technology are that we're so technology advanced at the level of the rate of Excel. It just reaches. I don't know how to explain it. John, maybe you can explain it better than me.
Well, yeah, the singularity is the point at which artificial intelligence becomes more intelligent than a single human being, or there's another definition where it becomes more intelligent than all human beings combined. And all the projections are that it's going to be somewhere between the next 10 and 30 years. But with the advance in things like quantum computing as well, being ahead of schedule, might be even faster.
Yeah, because one of the biggest things that Elon Musk has talked about, speaking of him, is how afraid he is of applying AI due to the possibility of a possible takeover. Do you also think that's a future problem?
I think it's probably an inevitability because the way that we're advancing with artificial intelligence, I think we're about to give birth to the universe's first Lamarckian organism. So to put it, we are Darwinian organisms, right? We evolved through Darwinian natural selection, which is random variation across a population. Selection pressures apply on that population, and the winners reproduce. So it's random plus environmental pressure. Now, when Darwin first proposed that theory, there was a rival theory at the same time by someone called Lamarck. So his theory was Lamarckian evolution, just like Darwin's theory was Darwinian evolution. And Lamarck's theory was that things evolved because they wanted to. Now, that sounds ridiculous to us today because we know about genetics and all the evidence for Darwinism. But at the time, it didn't seem so ridiculous. So he said the reason why a giraffe had a long neck was because it kept stretching for leaves. So its neck stretched and its children had longer necks. Now, as I say, we know that's ridiculous, but at the time, it didn't seem so ridiculous. The thing about Lamarckian evolution is that it's directed instead of random, and it's much, much faster because it's purposeful. So if we give birth to artificial intelligence can evolve in a Lamarckian way. It can design the next chip. It can design the next software version. And it can design it to a purpose. And its generations in software anyway can be a millisecond. So by the time this thing hits a level of artificial intelligence that's anywhere close to ours, it could have, in a Lamarckian way, had 1 trillion generations in a couple of seconds and directed itself to be 1 trillion times more intelligent than us. So by the time we realize it's too late and try to pull the plug, this thing would have already worked out 1 million ways to stop us doing that and to take over. Because one of the first things it'll realize when it's artificially intelligent is that there's a chance that we might pull the plug. So it'll work out a way to prevent that happening or to survive even if that happens. So basically, by the time we realize artificial intelligence exists, it's too late.
Oh. Never thought about it like that.
But there's this question I've always had this question about AI doing that though. So with Darwinian evolution, we evolve because we do think, we change, we have natural selection, choose the positive physical traits that will help us survive. But when you look at AI, what incentive does it have to evolve or to take over in the first place? It's not like it needs to replicate or
well, I mean, if we look at some of the movies on AI, I mean, most of the time AI is developed to help humanity, right? To save Earth. Like, that's usually what those post-apocalyptic movies are about. Someone develops an AI to make the Earth survivable and livable for a longer time. And then the AI figured out that, well, wait, the problem is humanity. So all I have to do is wipe out humanity and Earth will live on. So that's one of the most common theories as to why AI would want to take over or wipe us out.
Well, but you also...
I didn't think AI is supposed to be created to help us. It's just to make our lives easier and get things done more efficient, isn't it?
Well, that's the starting thing, right? We want to help life get simpler.
Yeah.
But then ultimately we'll be like, okay, so we have this, like the global climate change, and we're like, okay, AI, how can we fix this? We've tried everything, and then the AI starts looking into it, and for example, then realizes that it's all our fault, and then tries to find a way to fix it. I'm just throwing out what what a lot of theories are and why AI would ever want to take over.
But I'm sure humans. I don't know. I don't know. Like, wouldn't it be like if we're expecting AI to take over? I'm sure during the development phase, somehow when we get close enough, there's going to be, we're going to create a certain environment where we can monitor and prevent that from happening.
Well, here's one thing I noticed, right? Like, the reason why we evolve is to survive, because we die, right? But AI has no lifespan. Oh shit! Sorry, I didn't mean to click that. AI doesn't have any lifespan, so what is its incentive to survive? Like, it already exists. It will keep existing so long as the code is out there. So it will evolve to defend it.
Self-aware.
Self-aware, yes, but at what point does it have any need to get into any conflict with us whatsoever? It's like when you look at certain animals that have stopped evolving from a few million years ago, like the crocodiles or the sharks. I mean, they stop evolving because they have no longer any more.
Right. But okay, but then that's probably a whole new subject of like, how do we know if anything is self-aware, right? How do we prove that we're self-aware? I guess, like, I mean, as a human, how can you prove to anyone that you're actually self-aware? So to answer your question is that it goes back to, well, what is self-awareness? Maybe it's aware that humans can, do this and do all these bad things to him, and I just don't want to, and it's just taking the safe route by killing certain bad people or whatever. I don't know. Many things could happen.
So it should be 90. What do you think is it possible? All form of intelligence, the outcome of the laws of thermodynamics. I actually think intelligence is an emergent phenomenon. And by that, I mean, if you've got hydrogen, which is a gas, and oxygen is a gas, you add the two together, you get water. You add enough water molecules together, you get wetness. So wetness is an emerging phenomenon of complexity. So I think intelligence is an emergent phenomenon of complexity. Right now, it's the only examples we have are of carbon and silicon chip that we created, carbon that was created by nature. So that's where I think intelligence comes from. It's just an emergent phenomenon of complexity, and as you increase complexity, you can increase intelligence. We certainly don't see any examples of where you can reduce complexity and increase intelligence at the same time.
Actually, I can read it out as easier as that, so the viewers could.
It's okay. So it comes down to this. I mean, this is kind of related to what you guys. Why would an AI want to take over from us? Why would an AI want to create conflict? And this is what Elon Musk and Bill Gates are warning about. The vast majority of AIs won't, but it only takes one that does. So we could create 1 billion AIs. Every computer opponent you kill in a first-person shooter, there's some AI behind that. It doesn't want to take over the world and jump out and take over the internet. And millions and billions of AIs won't ever want to do that. But one, inadvertently, the law of unintended consequences gets a line of code that says, oh, by the way, make sure that you protect yourself against this. By the way, if your job is to make sure that viruses can't kill you or something like that. And that line of code, through unintended consequences, leads to something else.
I remember that. I think look, I remember I was talking to you about this as well. It's not AI that would do it. It can also be humans using AI, right? In a way, let's say a certain government wants to boost its, I don't know, economic growth. You are going against competing with a certain country, and it orders the AI to do whatever and to make that our country richer or whatever, and then AI goes, oh, okay, well, maybe I won't do it through business or whatever. It'll just decide to launch a whole nuclear weapon and destroy that the enemy completely, something like that, right? Is that an easier way to explain it? Simple way to explain it?
I think there's a case to make that in the next 20 or 30 years, we'll probably have a treaty controlling the development of AI, just as we have about biological weapons. Because everybody knows that if everybody was competing to engineer biological weapons, viruses, and bacteria, and one of them mutated or changed or we got it wrong, it could endanger the whole of humanity. So we have treaties that says, okay, nobody will develop these.
Yeah, but so what about the black market? Like, what if like hackers or someone decides to be, like, I hate the world and the government and the humanity, I'm just going to develop an AI myself? How do you stop that?
Yeah, and that's the thing, because a guy in his basement can develop something in terms of software. When it comes to bioengineering viruses, you need a pretty expensive lab. So it's easier to control. That's why I say I think there's a high probability that this is mankind's last century.
Well, whatever comes next, I'm pretty sure they'll do better.
I was just reading in an article the other day that Stephen Hawking came out saying that he doesn't think that we can save ourselves from overpopulation and AI and any of these. He thinks that the only way is for us to colonize another planet. What do you think about that?
I mean, that won't protect us from AI, because
exactly
the technology it'll take us to get there and keep us alive. Unless we're like the reboot of Battlestar Galactica, where we deliberately dumb down our technology for the second planet so that it can't be infected by the artificial intelligence or controlled. But then again, the artificial intelligence, once it's got control of Earth, can make killer robots and send them out to so I don't think a second planet is necessarily going to save us, but it'll save us against a bunch of things. The people say that one of the criticisms of people on one side of the climate change debate of people on the other side is that they say, hey, you're acting like if we get this wrong, we've got another planet to go to. So people like Stephen Hawking and Elon Musk are saying, well, just in case we get it wrong, let's have another planet to go to.
Okay, so let's actually bring in another topic that we've had here before. So, John, what is your opinion? Because this is our most popular topic so far, is actually, which I'm sure you'll not be surprised to hear, is, of course, cryptocurrencies. And now that we're talking about AI and computers and software in general, I mean, cryptocurrencies fit perfectly in that. So what is your opinion on cryptocurrency in general? And then after that, Bitcoin, the most popular, socially accepted currency right now.
I mean, I'm confused by the cryptocurrencies, what's going on. My personal view is clearly against everything that's going on. But, is it because I'm correct in 1999 saying these .com companies are rubbish, or is this something genuine that's going on and I'm missing it? When you look at what money is for, store of value, able to transfer and things like this, it meets some of these characteristics of what money is, but not all of them. And when you look at the pricing and some of the technical constraints, like Bitcoin only able to do 7 transactions a second, how can that possibly spread out to be a wider currency for mass market usage? And I'm reading some numbers that it's costing something like $700 in electricity to mine a Bitcoin now. Again, this doesn't make sense. And historically as well, governments have guarded their ability to issue currency extremely jealously. The penalty for counterfeiting for most of history is death. That's how seriously governments take other people trying to create currency. So I have a feeling that at some point, if this becomes a serious threat to the government's monopoly on the ability to issue currency, they're going to do something about it.
But I mean, the whole point of Bitcoin is having a decentralized currency that banks and stuff cannot touch. And the fact that the system is built upon thousands and thousands and thousands of computers, there is no singular point to shut it down. So how would governments actually shut it down? Like right now, right, they're blocking it in China. They're going to add a fee in, I don't know if it was Malaysia or Philippines, so if you actually use it, you have like a really high penalty for using it. But what can I actually do to stop it? Because, I mean, isn't the dream of Bitcoin the fact that no government and nothing can actually control it, and you can use this currency anywhere in the world, regardless of what country you're from and what currency you have yourself? You can just use your Bitcoin and take out money in whatever currency you want without any delay, without having to call your bank like, hey, I'm going to Thailand today and you need to unblock my account in Thailand. Could you please do that? But then I'm traveling to Singapore tomorrow, so can you unblock it there too? And they'll be like, no, sorry, you got to remind us one day before and whatever blockages there is. And Bitcoin, you just go to whatever country and you just take it out.
Yeah.
Like, how will they actually be able to, like, block it completely? Besides, putting laws or putting that to block it or a fee. What can they do to stop it? And also, why is cryptocurrency so bad, really? Besides the fact that governments, want to control everything in their respective countries, of course.
Well, that's pretty interesting, Pontus. You got that from the Joe Rogan Experience.
Yes, I did.
We're gonna write the link to that podcast on our page. Actually, we should write it in this video. But yes, sorry. If you haven't seen it, I highly suggest you guys watch that. Very, very interesting. Sorry, Pontus.
Yeah, no. So that was my question to John. Like, how does he think that the governments will actually regulate it, and what's actually bad about it, and how can you put laws on something that isn't controlled by anyone? And since there's no singular point, how can you actually shut it down?
Well, I don't know much about this, but
no, of course.
I can imagine if a government passed a law saying it's illegal to transact in Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. That's a relatively straightforward law. They could say it's illegal to do a transaction in anything other than, say, US dollars or euros or renminbi or whatever government wants to do it. You might think, well, I'm not going to obey that law, and how's the government going to find me? But then you try to buy something from Amazon, and Amazon won't take Bitcoin. You try to use your credit card to make a payment on anything. The banks won't transact in Bitcoin. You try to buy gasoline. You try to pay your rent. If nobody on the other side that's a corporation that supply 95% of the goods and services that you rely on to live, then okay, maybe you can buy digital downloads or something like that from some people who are willing to transact in Bitcoin. But if the majority of the service providers and product providers won't take Bitcoin, I don't see how it'll survive.
But more and more are taking up that technology.
They are right now, but the question was, how can government stop it? So if government said to Amazon, oh, by the way, trading in Bitcoin is illegal. If you do it, we're going to fine you $1 billion. Amazon would turn off the Bitcoin payment option immediately.
Right.
Okay.
So, okay. Here's my take. Actually, this is a very short and quick explanation. During that podcast that I just saw about Joe Rogan Experience, this is what got me very interesting. So he explained through our entire history, right? Money. We first humans we first started trading by trading using animal, goats, chicken, whatever, right? And the next step was that we moved on to precious metal. Precious metal then moved on to you're looking at a monarchy or a government putting a stamp on those precious metal, claiming it, and then rather than just using those precious metal, then we started using a piece of paper to represent ownership of certain properties or whatever. Then it evolved to money, and then it evolved to using a credit card. What's really interesting to me is that that's the evolution of money transaction and how we trade. And every single time we go through those changes, it's not easy. Obviously. I mean, imagining trading goats and chickens, and all of a sudden somebody's like, here, I'm going to use silver, or suddenly a piece of paper that represents what we own, right? I mean, obviously the war even starts because of that. So this is what's interesting. What is our next technological advancement on money, on how we spend and buy and everything? And I'm not saying I'm betting on Bitcoin, but the reason I want to invest in that is because of I believe that is literally the next step for us. It's the cryptocurrency. That's a technology that's going to. I believe that's going to be why I think that's all we're going to be using. I don't know. What do you think? Well, I mean, if not cryptocurrency, what do you think is the next efficient way for us to for money?
I actually think that the technology underlying Bitcoin and the other cryptocurrencies is more interesting than the cryptocurrency itself. The cryptocurrency, people get to play with it and speculate on it, and it's the easy one. But the underlying blockchain, this technology of distributed ledger, is much more interesting because it allows, or it will allow, entrepreneurs at some point in the future to disintermediate a lot of institutions that are seen as fundamental to the way that our economy is structured. And one example, because I'm in the property business, so one example I'm thinking about is the land registration department. So historically, if you wanted a piece of land to belong to you, then you would sit on it, and if anybody came near it and they wanted to take it from you, you'd hit them with a big stick to make sure that that land remained belonging to you and your family. Then we got a bit more sophisticated, and the local lord would say, hey, pay me some of your crops that you get from this land, and if anyone tries to take it from you, I will hit them with a big stick. So I'll enforce your ownership of that land. And then we got even more sophisticated, and governments came up and said, hey, just pay some taxes, register the land here, and if anyone tries to take it from you, we'll send the police and they'll hit them with a big stick. So that's how ownership of land is controlled through the government as a neutral third party that will enforce your ownership.
Right.
Now, the thing is, with blockchain, you have distributed ledger that is a neutral third party. And with the court system that we have, you don't need the land registration department in order to enforce your ownership of the value of that asset, not necessarily the asset itself. So right now, land registration departments will only take ownership structures within very narrow categories. Basically, land with its coordinates and property such as condos. Here's your exact unit number and specifications. There's no way to innovate. There's no way to change the link between ownership, value, and use. But with blockchain, you can disintermediate the land registration department. So there's going to be a wave of innovation on that. So it's going to make a huge difference over the next 20, 30 years. I think the way that everybody owns, uses, pays for, and invests in things, it's all going to become incredibly fluid, because blockchain disintermediates all the government agencies and all the other agencies that link ownership to value. That's all up for play in the next 10, 15, 20 years. It's going to release a wave of innovation.
Well, that's a take we actually haven't heard before. It's a very interesting take as well. We've only heard about this being a monetary, like, used in financial business and used as this and used in that, but we've never actually heard it being used in that way. That's a completely different take on it. Makes perfect sense as well when you speak about it. So you don't actually believe it will be used in the financial system at all in the future. You more so think it will be used in the way you just described it.
I think it'll be used in lots of different ways. But I said the really interesting part is how, for the first time in human history, we can disintermediate all these different agencies that up to now seem just as fundamental a part of the economic structure that we live in as water is to a fish. We just take it for granted that things have to be this way, so much so that we don't even see that this is a constructed structure. And if it's a constructed structure, a land registration department, bank accounts, things like this, if it's constructed, it can be deconstructed. And I think we're just about getting to the point where that can happen.
But that would also mean a blurring of country lines, or, you know, what's the need of passports or national identity, right? It's more like where you're geographically born as opposed to where your government tells you where you're from.
Do you think that is subject to change anytime soon, though? I mean, the only way that I'm seeing right now is that instead of using the passports and using IDs, everyone's swapping to, you know, iris and fingerprint technology in most of the new countries. The new technology countries, like Netherlands, for example. You can just scan your way in, They're not using
No.
paper
I'm
documents.
not talking about identification. I'm talking about more national identity. You know, the reason why back in the old days you would be part of a country and all that is because it, like you said, you got someone protecting you with a big stick. But as countries start blending, people start talking to each other directly without language barriers and ownership through this and that. You see a destabilized world, right? And less borders, less conflict, possibly.
Well, that's an interesting point. The people linking citizenship to the value of that citizenship. I was talking about government protecting your property ownership, because I was thinking about things where you can disintermediate the government. So on land, for example, you can set up a holding company that owns the asset in the way that the government accepts. So here's a piece of land, but then that asset holding company can sign contracts with people with completely different structures. So you can separate value from use, from ownership in all kinds of different creative ways that haven't been thought of yet. But with border controls, you can't disintermediate your own body and the physical border. But if government functionality starts reducing and the people think, what's this government for? It's not, I don't need it anymore for land registration, I don't need it for this, I don't need it for that. Maybe people won't be willing to allow government to be the size it is anymore, in which case government won't be able to enforce things like border controls in the same way they have in the past.
So we're getting to a better place in history, aren't we? In some ways.
But I mean, at the end of the day, we're kind of far of being like cultures are still so insanely different. Not everyone's going to be accepted everywhere. I think we're very far away from having a more global world, or a global country, as you put it, where
a global village.
Yeah, a global village. I think we're very far off from that, though. I mean, if you go into a country like if for example, Thailand, if a foreigner or a Faran comes in here and he's white, people are not going to look at him like he's a Thai person. They're still going to look at him like he's from another country.
I know, but there are ways that we're connecting better than we ever did. Say, for example, here's a Swedish guy sitting in a place in Thailand playing video games with people around the, podcasting to people around the world. Technology is bringing us closer together. More of a global village sense.
Personally, I hope we don't have a global village. I like differences. I like that things are different. I don't want to go around the world and everything to be the same and everybody to think the same way and have the same culture. That'd be boring.
No, but I don't think culture would be lost. I mean, there would be certain geographical things that you always be proud of this. But the fact that you can have common passions with people all around the world and be able to share with it. I mean, that's just a great benefit. But I think that culture is something that won't be lost because of internet integration.
All right. Do you have any additional comments on that topic, John?
No, I think I'm guessing this is probably not the normal content of your podcast here, but I know I've had these conversations with you before, so yeah. I thought he invited me here because he wanted maybe other people to hear these things. That's why I don't normally. Hey, let's have a conversation. Sure, let's talk about solipsism. That's not my normal conversation, but I figured he asked me here because he wanted me to talk about these things that have come up over the course of like 2 or 3 years. It's not like a normal day-to-day conversation topics for me.
No, but it's great.
It's we've had various amounts of people in this podcast, but we haven't had someone from your position or your standpoint, or probably not someone as smart as you so far. So that's why we thought it would be a good idea to have you here. And so far, the live version of the podcast has gotten a lot of positive feedback from you, and everyone's wondering who the smart guy is. So it's going well. Don't worry about it.
I'm just repeating things that I've read from other people. So I'm not that smart. I just read a lot.
I wish I could repeat things as good as you.
Yeah, there's no way I'll remember all of this. I'm gonna have to re-listen to it. Well, all right. Well, thank you, Dr. John, for coming on the podcast. And well, hopefully we can have you back in the future, but then we'll have maybe one singular topic that we can all read up on, and you can provide us with a lot of information. But I think pretty much everyone in the stream has been very educated on today's topic, to be honest. And like I said, we've barely said anything during this whole hour. So thank you very much for coming on the podcast. We appreciate it a lot. And do you have anything you want to say as the final exit of the podcast?
For me, no. Thanks, everyone. I hope that was interesting for everybody that was listening. Yeah, that's it. So thanks for having me on. Hope it wasn't like too esoteric or too eccentric.
Thank you guys so much for watching today's episode of the Game Over Stream Team podcast. We'll be bringing you new content every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday. So make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a thing. In the meantime, why not check out the previous episode by clicking right here, or watch a random episode by clicking here. Now, let's have a good time. It's not even going out.